Has the thought occurred to you that people will regret the things they didn't take action on? Has that question gone across your mind even since you've been listening to our podcast? Today's guest, Bronson Hill, breaks down how that question was the one thing that caused him to take the leap from a super successful sales career into the world of syndicating real estate investing.
Yeah, Bronson's an amazing author, podcast host, someone we've got to connect with in a mastermind. And speaking of masterminds, right, Joey, one of the things that I really resonated from this podcast that Bronson talked about is how that mastermind has helped him expand his thinking, helped him cross the fence, if you will, of moving out of being a full-time W-2 employee to now becoming a full-time investor. And he talks a little bit about, if you followed our right next thing grid, you know, like one of the fastest ways to get to 200% of passive income over your monthly expenses is by building a fund. And he goes through that process that he did. And he says that, you know, one of the key elements there is that you have to make yourself valuable to valuable people. So I want you to like take these nuggets and figure out how they apply to your life so you don't have regret. Joey, let's jump in right now with Bronson Hill.
Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Wealth Without Wall Street tribe, get ready for another financial freedom story with Bronson Hill. Bronson, so glad to be with you today.
Hey, Joey, Russ, really excited to be here. I love talking, wealth without Wall Street. I mean, I love that title, what you guys are doing, your mastermind, just how you're adding value. So super excited to be here and talk with you and just have a great conversation.
All right. Well, before we press record, you said something I really want to draw out for our listeners. You said people regret what they didn't do. Take me to the moment where that really had such an impact in your life.
Yeah. So this quote, I don't remember who said it, but it's basically at the end of your life, you regret more of the things that you didn't do rather than the things that you did. And, what happened, I've shared this story. I was approaching 40. I had just recently gotten divorced. And I really kind of, in my life, there were all these big dreams I had. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to do real estate. I wanted to make a big impact, make a lot of money and be able to give a lot of money to help fight human trafficking in the world. And I just realized I wasn't really tracking towards that. And so I just realized that for me, I needed to start living more courageously and really putting myself out there, because I think for a lot of my life, I'm sure many people can relate, is just I've lived with just fear of what people think, fear of, what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if I fail? Does that make me a failure? And so as I really, just kind of said, well, I really want to be 70 or 80 years old and say, you know what, regardless of how it turns out, at least I applied, at least I did everything I possibly could to go after those dreams. And so I think that that's something that I still remember, I still inspire myself with. How can I, do more, achieve more, be more, and just really go after more, and not just more stuff, but more potential, more, what was I put here on this earth to do, and getting after that, getting after purpose, and getting after the why, and getting after making a difference.
Well, I know that you had been in corporate America, had done really well there. So obviously you started making some changes, though. You decided that corporate America wasn't for you. Was that one of the things you didn't want to regret not doing, is taking more, maybe an entrepreneur stand in your life?
Yeah. So it's interesting, they say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it comes down to pretty much every area of life, your fitness level, your finances, your health, your spirituality. And so if you want to change anything, you got to get around different people. So to me, I had this great job. I was working corporate sales in medical devices. So I'd go in and work with cardiologists and surgery, heart surgical stuff. It was very interesting. I was getting paid over $200,000 a year. I did well. I was in the industry for about 10 years. And I wanted to leave the job. I'd started doing real estate on the side. And all of my friends and family were just like, why would you ever leave your great job? I could do it in about 30 hours a week. So I've got this great job, making great money, not working that many hours. And my friends are like, why, you're crazy. Why would you want to leave? And then I joined an entrepreneurs group. And there were 5 other guys who met together once a month for a couple of years. And, about a few months into it, I just said, hey, this is what I want. I want to leave my job and I want to go full time with this. And I explained it all to them. They understood the business, and they kind of, without exception, they all looked at me and said, you should leave pretty much as soon as possible. This is a good upside. You should do it. And I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, well, I haven't found the support that I need. I really needed some of that support. And one guy said something. He said, it may not work. I mean, you may get it, it may not work, but he's like, you could always go back to medical sales. And I never really realized that. I think we're so trained often to be an employee or to be whatever we are. Maybe someone was raised in a family of physicians. Oh, I've got to be a physician, or I've got to be this certain thing. And when you can let go of that and you can just become like, hey, I'm here and I'm willing to get around people that can help get me to the next level. So I think who you're around and building that community around you, kind of that mastermind, as Napoleon Hill says, is absolutely essential if you want to do anything great in life.
So walk me through, I think it's critical that what you just pointed out is that there was a turning point. There was a point that you said, man, I don't want to look back and regret. What was the next thing after you even maybe got some more confirmation from that group? What was the next thing that you took action on that led you to where you're at right now?
So I think I had been doing it, again, I think I'm a big guy who's the idea of low risk experiments. For example, if I want to start investing, maybe a low risk experiment is going to a meetup, right? Or looking at 10 deals, right? You didn't lose any money. Maybe you lost a little time, but it's not a big deal. So I had this kind of thing where I would just start working and developing in one area. So instead of just immediately one day quitting my job and burning the boats, I was like, well, let me see if I can do this on the side, and maybe I'll work 30 hours here and I'll do 20, 30 hours in real estate, and I'll try to do this. I started really kind of doing both. So I've been doing both up to that point, but there was a decision there that I had to make where I had a partnership I had been working with in real estate, doing large multifamily. Now we have about 200 million in multifamily real estate, but I've been working with a couple of partners, and the partnership kind of ended. We'd kind of reached a place. There was nothing, no bad blood, but it just was kind of like, okay, we got to where we wanted to get to. Did a few deals together. We raised, $15 million together. So I learned a lot of great experience. But I had this point where I was at my job and I realized I needed to really put myself out there. I need to start doing podcasts and get on my LinkedIn and social media and hire a virtual assistant and just really create my own Bronson Equity platform and really start reaching more people. But I knew if I did that, there was a risk that I'd blow up my job, right? I've got this great job and a chance I could actually blow up my job. But at that point I had enough passive income to cover my expenses, but that was still a struggle of I don't know, how do I walk through this? What do I do? And so it actually did happen a few months later where a boss's boss got a hold of this. And what's this Bronson Equity thing? And a lot of times in sales, if you don't work from an office, people are like, well, perception is reality. So there must not be us. Maybe we must not be working at all because you're doing all this other stuff. And so then it actually, it was about 6 or 8 months after I kind of started doing this. It kind of did blow up the other job in a way where they kind of started saying, hey, maybe you need to find something else or whatever, which was really hard for me because I was a top performer. I was a President's Club guy, which means you're top 10% in the sales force. So just the idea of being an achiever or doing something not as well in one area to really do something really well in another area, that was kind of a thing I had to coach myself through. But it became this beautiful distraction. When I left, I was really happy I left when I did.
Well, we actually had a guy that had shared with us on a podcast many years ago. He created a podcast, Joe. You have to remind me of the name. It was something like How I Quit My Job, or I Want to Quit My Job, or something like that. And he was still working at the job.
It was for the Postal Service.
Yeah.
The U.S. Postal Service.
There's a guy I know, actually, he's a multifamily syndicator as well. He was like an engineer for Google or one of these big tech things. And he knew he needed to leave his job, but he just couldn't do it. Like his family, or he just couldn't. So he actually hired like a life coach or some sort of mindset coach to help him quit his job. Like his wife was like, okay, if you're going to quit your job, why don't you just quit your job? And he's like, no, I need some help to get a mindset shift to just be able to do this well. And it is a very different mindset. I mean, it's hard just to be like, okay, if you're so used to a job, it's kind of like an addiction. Like, how could you not go to work, or how could you not have a paycheck? Like, it's a big adjustment,
Yeah, well, that's like Tommy and Tommy Boy, right? Like most people go to school for 7 years, are called doctors, right? There's some people that don't want to leave college because they want to go get a job. There's some people that want to leave their jobs because they're nervous about what's on the other side. They're just so used to doing it that specific way. All right. That's not what we're here though. Like your expertise though, I want to bring this out for the audience because you have a very unique way that you look at deals and you've been able to not only personally invest in the real estate space, but now you're also being able to bring other people alongside. Talk a little bit about your gift set. When you look at deals, you mentioned having over 200 million in real estate. That seems like a lot, right? So how did you decide that that was the asset class for you? How did that connect to your own personal investor DNA?
Yeah, so I think in general, real estate's a very understandable. People understand real estate. Like for me, most people think, I think most people listening, or even that I meet that are physicians or other things, I should be buying real estate. And they think, oh, I have a house, I live in a house, I should buy another house. And they buy a rental house, or they buy two, or they buy five, or they buy a vacation rental. And that was my plan. I had a small single family portfolio with a partner in Cleveland, Ohio, and another state. And so we had 4 or 5 houses, and my plan was to get to 30 of these, and then to be able to retire, quote unquote, retire with passive income. And I realized it was a lot of work, and I was just kind of struggling with how much work. It didn't really quite work as well as it looked on paper. So it penciled, but it didn't actually turn out that way. There's a lot more expenses when you're buying in rougher part of Cleveland. It's like, you're not probably going to have the highest quality tenants in general, and so. And there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so I have a cousin who I hadn't seen in years who does multifamily real estate. And he said, well, this sounds like a lot of work, your plan of 30 houses. Why don't you do multifamily? And I said, well, I'd love to, but I don't have the money. And he said, you can raise the money. And that's how I learned about syndication. And that took me on a journey over the next, 6 months of just learning as much as I could, starting a meetup, finding my first investor there at the first meetup, and then finding a partner, raising 15 million over the next 18 months after that. So, it kind of went pretty fast. But I think what I've realized is, there's a saying, it takes money to make money, which is true. It just doesn't have to be your own money. And so if somebody is looking to syndicate, it's amazing how, people either have time or they have money. The easier way is if you have money, then you can invest your money in deals, and you do well if you vet and operate deals and things like that. But multifamily is on the other hand, or you can, instead of having money, if you have time, like I had, or maybe you don't have either, but you can make the time, then you can go basically create a way to scale wealth for other people. So that's really what I did. And what I love about multifamily is that so many advantages. It has tax advantages. It has an inflation hedge. Generally, rents grow with inflation. You have less volatility in the stock market. It does cash flow. There's the tax benefits that go with it as well. So there's so many benefits that go to it, and it's a very understandable investment. So I just actually finished writing a book recently about passive investing called Fire Yourself, and it's basically it's not out yet, but it will be out. And it's basically just talking about, like multifamily. One of the parts is multifamily is kind of the gateway drug, in the sense of, like, once you start, it's like you can branch out to other things. So now we're doing ATM machines, which are very consistent cash flowing monthly investments. We're doing car washes. We're doing oil and gas technology, kind of VC stuff in that space. We're looking at deals in many different types of spheres. But I think multifamily in general is a very understandable thing. It's something we know there's a huge demand for. And I think it's a great place to start.
I didn't know we were going to go this way, but if it's all right, I'd like to take us here, because we are actually about to leave in a couple of weeks, Joey and I, and another 45 or so people down to the British Virgin Islands. And it's focused on building an investment fund. And what you just said is that, hey, I didn't know a lot about this. I was trying to figure out how I was going to get into space. And I had a mentor who says, hey, you don't have to be the one with the money. You can actually go raise the money. And so you did. What did you do though? How did you figure out how to start raising upwards now of, $100 million or whatever it is, like, in order to acquire all this real estate? Like, what did you do? Because I think there's people out there that are on the fence of figuring out, how do I become financially free? I talked to a guy yesterday and he was saying, hey, I'm trying to do the math. I'm trying to figure out exactly how many deals do I have to do where we'll produce this amount of passive income, so it'll equal how much money I spend every single month. I spend 15 grand a month. I want to figure out how many deals I have to do. I was like, well, there's a lot of different ways to get there. He's like, yeah, but with the money I have, it just seems like it's going to take forever. And I was like, well, but you're only assuming one of the 5 elements to do a deal, which is money. There's other things like opportunity, time, experience, relationship that can add to it. So what is it that you did? So I want you to listen in really quickly as you're riding down the road, you're running on the treadmill. Bronson's about to tell you the way to actually become the person who's raising the money and doing deals. Go.
Yeah, so really a big turning point for me was, I think making the decision that, hey, I'm going to do this, whatever it takes. And it sounds really simple and really basic, but Tony Robbins, he has a saying, he says, it's in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. So there came a point there as I was learning about multifamily, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to leave my job in 3 years. Like, I'm just going to figure out how to do it. I really want to do this. I'm going to keep it, keep the end in mind, change my approach until I get there. And so, really what I did is I did as much networking. I listened to, there's really two things, networking and education. So I went to as many events as I could, whether local meetups. I started a meetup. My first investor came from me leading a meetup. I basically found somebody who had a real estate meetup, and I said, hey, let's start another one just on multifamily. And I said, I had a relationship with this person, and I said, hey, you just show up and I'll do all the work. And they said, that sounds like a great idea. So I did that. And I basically 60 people were there at the first meeting in Los Angeles. And we promoted a lot, but there were 60 people there. This guy shows up that I'd never seen before. And he says, hey, I'd invest in one of your deals. And I'm like, are you talking to me? Like, what's but my sales background, I was like, oh, let me get together with this guy. So I got coffee with him. And I showed him a sample deal and said, this is what a deal would look like. And he said, yeah, I'd invest 100K in that. So then I connected him with another guy I met at that meeting who had a deal and was looking for money. So basically all it was connecting money with a deal. People usually start one of two ways. Either they raise money or they find deals. And there was another event, fast forward from that first investor, 6 months. It was a very expensive event. It was like 6,000 or 7,000 for a week on a cruise with investors and, with different syndicators. And I was there, and somebody said at a roundtable event, said, it's like that quote from Jim Rohn, who's a motivational speaker, make yourself valuable to valuable people. And I'd never heard that before, but I thought about it. I was like, make yourself valuable to valuable people. And I was thinking like, oh, what is that? Okay, I guess if somebody's valuable, they're either adding a lot of value to the marketplace or they're just wealthy. And if I could just find a way to create some value for them, maybe that would be great. So I thought about a guy that was on that trip who thought, man, this guy's adding incredible value, but I don't know how he's teaching other people to do syndication, but I don't know how it's going for him raising money. So I went to him and I said, hey, how's it going in this area? What if we work together? And I helped with, podcasts and phone calls and just kind of helped to get people on board with this investment. Is that something that would be helpful? And he said, yeah, let's do it. So I ended up kind of leaving some of my stuff on the side and joined them. And that's from where I'm going from raising 100K to over the next 18 months, raising $15 million. And I had 1,000 one-on-one phone calls with high net worth investors. These are Zoom calls, the average net worth about 2 million. And that's just, you talk about an education. I mean, that's incredibly educational. So if you get in motion and if you try to create value, you make yourself valuable to valuable people. Because a lot of people come to them and they say, hey, I want you to mentor me, or I want you to help me. But if you show up and say, hey, how can I help you in this specific area? They're not asking that. I mean, they're asking, the entrepreneur is asking that question a lot, but nobody else is asking that question. So that immediately sets you apart.
Yeah, Tribe, this is not the first time you've heard this on the show, is that you have some sort of value that you can add to the world. And God's given you specific ways that you see the world, resources, time, energy, experience, whatever it may be, that someone who is valuable needs. And it is one thing to come with a hand out and one thing to come with a hand up and say, how can I help this person become better version of themselves? So really, really insightful that you would say that, Bronson. Now, I'm not going to challenge you like Russ is and just say, go on this next question. I hope you appreciate that with my hand up and not out. But there is something I want to uncover, and that's for everybody listening. They can say, well, it sounds like Bronson has a sales background. He was a pastor at one point. Maybe being a syndicator or raising money for investments is only for someone who has a sales background. What would you agree with that comment? Would you add to it? Like, what else about you makes you a good syndicator?
Yeah, so I think that there's, definitely everything that we do, it adds to our skill set. It adds to our experience. And so when I was a youth pastor, there's a certain set of skills that you need. You're working with people, you're doing a lot of presenting of information, you're, trying to really figure out where people are at. Sales is similar. Some people will say, well, that seems very different. And they say, well, you switch from youth pastor to being in medical sales, that sounds so different, or now what you're doing now. But I've just always been a learner. And I think if you're willing to learn, you're able to grow. And, there's a saying by Brian Tracy says, if you want to earn more, you have to learn more. And so a lot of people, there's two ways people, again, typically come into being a part of operating big deals. It's either raising money or it's finding deals, or operating them. So some people will come in and say, hey, I've got a background as a CPA or as an engineer or a pilot. And some of those guys are great at, hey, instead of raising money, I'm going to be the one who finds deals. I'm the one that's networking with brokers and doing that. Or I'm going to be somebody who's working on a different element of the deal. I do think everybody can develop sales skills. And actually from what I was doing before, there were a lot of differences about it. But, I think learning how to talk to people and figuring out what they need, you don't have to be in sales to do it. There's people that I know that are physicians. I know a physician that, has been a physician for 25 years. He's raised $300 or $400 million. He's not in sales, doesn't have a sales background. He's got his orthopedic practice, and then he also does that. So I know many, many people that are not, sales background that has allowed them to do very well. So I think, the big thing is just getting an assessment of what you do. I didn't know when I started. I thought, I'm going to actually bring deals. I thought I like numbers. I like being able to, so I actually was trying to bring deals to different groups. And over time, looking back, it's like, okay, yeah, well, I've got 10 years of sales experience. This helps. So there's some things there that help. But, we all have ways we interact with people. And a lot of times, sometimes, if someone's a business owner or they have some wealth or some skills, they may have people they know that know, like, and trust them, right? And that's how people invest with them. You may have a network. And I didn't really have, I've had a couple doctors invest with me over the years that I knew from medical sales, but it really hasn't been a lot of that, right? It hasn't been this people that I knew. My family is really not wealthy. My dad's a college professor at a state college, and my mom's a teacher. Like, we don't come from money, but these are all very learnable skills that it comes from, where do you, what value can you add, and just trying to figure out a way to develop those skills.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/PIOS. There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, pop quiz day. Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Definitely. We always need to be figuring out better ways to develop our skills. And by the way, please excuse my impatience, right? Joey, thank you for making fun of me of that. I'm always sitting on G, waiting on O, and I did not mean for that to come out. I said the silent part out loud.
All good, man. You tell me go. I'm with the microphone. I'm going to go.
All right. As we're diving into this conversation, right? Like, it continues to make me think of different questions that come up, both in my own head, but also I've heard from others as it talks when you go into raising money, right? You just talked about some of the aspects in which you can do it and how you can take a skill set and be the person who's finding deals, person who's talking to investors, maybe the person who is working through the due diligence, right? There's certain people that are just really good, have high BS meters and can just shake things out. Some people are great negotiators. They build the relationships. But one of the things that, comes up and potentially is an obstacle to overcome is, man, how do I get over the fact that I am going to be taking someone else's money and investing it? And there's a possibility or probability that this deal could go bad. How do you handle that? How do you talk to people who are new? Because I know you're a part of a mastermind that does this too. How do you handle that? And how do you talk to new people about that?
Yeah, it is a concern, right? And that's, I think, everybody's nightmare getting into is like, well, what happens if there's a loss? Or, if I take Uncle Bob's, money. What's going to happen if, we're at Thanksgiving and there's been a lot, it gets really awkward at the table. Right. And that's something I tell people, like, that I have taken, a number of relatives. My parents have invested. I've got siblings that have invested. I've got other people that have invested, relatives. And I just try to tell them, hey, just so you know, there is risk involved here. And, there could be a loss of some, or all the there's risk involved here, and so everything's disclosed. There's a 100-page document typically with all the ways. If the manager gets struck by lightning, or if the place gets raided by hippos, or not seriously, but things that could potentially happen. And so you never want it to happen. I think also too, when you talk to people, and this is where when you have a conversation, it is important to ask, well, what is your net worth? And it's confidential, but tell us. And if somebody has a net worth, for us, if it's less than 300,000 or 400,000 and our minimum of 75K, we usually don't take their money, because we'll say, that's just too much of your money in one deal, and it's good to have some diversification. It's good to have money spread around. So a lot of times it's better not to. I know it's hard when you're first starting out, because you're like, I really should take everybody's money. But again, somebody who's got a $5 million net worth and they invest 100K, like, that's not going to really affect them a ton. They might be really upset and whatever and ticked up, but people should understand that every deal has risk, right? And every deal has risk. If anybody tells you something's guaranteed or something in investing is, there's no risk involved, run, right? It's just, so I try to tell people just in general that, hey, this stuff can happen. And I think, most people understand it. They understand, hey, things can go. Actually, had an investor a little while ago that had, we have one deal out of our 12 deals or something that's having some issues with it. It looks like, it's going to turn out fine. But this investor had a total loss in 2 different deals in the past by the same operator. And so when we started sharing some negative news on the deal, hey, here's what's happening. Some of it's out of control. Some of it's is what we're doing to fix it, whatever. She just immediately went to this place that she'd already been, right? Which is like, oh my gosh, it's another loss. And I said, well, no, that's not what happened. And I was able to kind of talk her through it, talk her down a little bit. But in any deal, there's always concerns that come up. And I think that's even when it comes from vetting a deal, vetting an operator, somebody's not going to be honest about that up front. That's something that I think everybody needs to be concerned about, because, it is about preparing people for success. And again, if it's monies that really can't be lost, or it's something that's the last money they have, you never, ever want to take that money. And you want to make sure you have that conversation, especially if it's a friend or family.
Yeah, that's a great lesson there. And it's some good insights as you keep sharing with our tribe here. One other question I want to ask is, in light of this show is all about creating financial freedom, passive income, exceeding your monthly expenses. It sounds like you got to that point and then you became a syndicator. You became someone who is putting deals together and all this sort of thing. How passive is that actual activity? Yeah, obviously we say passive income is not uninvolved, but to give somebody a vision of, man, maybe this is something I should be going down the path of, how would you compare it from passive versus active?
Yeah. So, I think with passive investing, a lot of people, I think it's this illusion that you sit on the beach and you watch the bank account, the money just piles in every single month. That can happen. It's true. And I think I do know passive investors that live that way. I do know some that, they really enjoy doing it. They're in 70 plus deals, and it's a lot of administration, a lot of work to just keep track of 70 deals. We have passive things we do. We have active things we do. Some people just think, all I do is sit at home all day and do podcasts and or just hang out and I travel. But, one thing I think a lot of people think when they're thinking of financial freedom, they think, I want to have more money, but really what they want is more time. And so financial freedom really involves time freedom. And that's one thing I've been really happy to do. One of my goals is to travel 4 to 6 times internationally a year. And so in the last 6 months, I've been, I think, 3 or 4 times internationally. I was in Chile, I did the Patagonia Trail. I was in Barcelona and some other areas of Spain. I was in Belize, was in Hawaii last month, going to Belize next month again. And I got a trip planned in the fall. So, that's just stuff that for me, I enjoy. So I do have some flexibility. And that's the thing that I love most, is that I don't have to go in at a certain time and do certain things. But it's almost like being a farmer though, right? Like this is a biblical analogy. A friend of mine asked me, what does a follower or disciple look like, right? Somebody who's a person of faith. What does that look like? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, what does that look like? And there's basically 3 examples. And I think even somebody who's not a follower of Jesus would appreciate it. It's just that 3 examples are given. One is a Olympic level athlete, like a Michael Phelps. One is a special forces soldier. And the third one is a wealthy entrepreneur. Now, the first two are very structured, very rigid, right? This is kind of how you operate as a person of character, and you're doing this. You have your commanding officer, or you've got your coach, and your Michael Phelps, was in the pool 6 hours a day. The third one, wealthy entrepreneur, on that day would have been a farmer, right? So the farmer is somebody who they can take trips, they have some flexibility, but if they don't plant, if they don't tend those, they don't have somebody working the soil, they're not going to be able to harvest. And that's the thing when you're an entrepreneur, you have to continually be tending and planting and getting ready to harvest, because if you don't, then you're not going to get paid, you're not going to eat. And so I think as it's a different way I think a lot of people describe it, but I think, what we're doing is we're not trying to, okay, we've got a deal and we're going to hunt, and I've got to go find $5 million. I'm going to call everybody I know, and I'm going to do, hey, call them 10 times, and like that's a hunter mentality, right? We've all been at used car lots, and we've spent that kind of vibe, right? This used car salesy vibe of like, you look great in this nice 1970 Buick. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, well, let's actually I want to be a farmer where I'm basically constantly putting out content. I'm constantly putting out information. I'm having calls and adding value. And then when that fruit is ripe, it will be ready, to pick. When the apple is ripe, it's not like you go and yank it off the tree. It's you give it a little tug, and if it comes off, it's ready. And if not, you leave it there and you move on. And so that's kind of really what I feel like I'm doing is this constant process of putting things out there, having investor calls. And then when we have a deal, it'll be a harvest, and whoever's ready, whatever fruit is ready, it will come forth. So there's a lot of analogies there I shared, but that's something that I enjoy sharing about.
Well, I think we also be considering planting seeds, right? We're planting seeds by saving money. We're planting seeds by investing in deals. And we're planting seeds in the way that we're leading our families, in the way that we're preparing, the conversations that we're having. All of that is farming. And then we are starting to reap. I think, to your point, I'm grateful that you said it, right? That financial freedom is not just having more money, it's having more of what you want, which a lot of people want more time. But you have to understand that also we're called to be in service, right? And financial freedom is not just sitting down and doing nothing. You are going to be in service of something. And if you're able to help people as a syndicator, for instance, Bronson, which I had several conversations with you now, I know this is a passion area for you, that you see a higher calling in it, that you're able to evaluate deals. It's helping you get what you want, but it's also helping a lot of other people get what they want. And to the point that you mentioned of having conversations with family members, if they don't invest with you, who are they going to invest with? Someone else, right? And how do you know that person is going to do the best thing for them? Do you think your sister is going to have someone looking out for her money that she doesn't know better than you, her brother, right? It's illogical to think that way. Yes, there could be an uncomfortable conversation if we don't do our job. And that's why you're in a mastermind, right? You're amongst groups on a regular basis that are talking about how to do these things and do these things well. Thank you for letting me take us down this road of becoming a syndicator. It wasn't really what I thought we were going to talk about, but I think it's interesting because the person listening may think that maybe this is the pathway. And also, I'm glad that you told them that it's not just sitting around doing nothing, but it's not a bunch of like hammering people for money calls either. There's just many different ways. People want to figure out, obviously, that, hey, I do want to invest in deals. I do want to invest in deals that maybe somebody out there is looking out for their sister. Maybe I'm not their sister or their brother, but I could be someone who could be investing in their projects and things like that. How would somebody connect with you? How would they find the deals that you're involved in?
So we, if you go to our website, bronsonequity.com, we have a ebook, which is how to use inflation to your advantage. It just kind of talks about, what are some of the ways, the strategies when inflation is high, which I think it's actually higher than the official 6-7%. It might be 10-15%. What are some ways you actually can get on the other side of the equation and not just get the pain at the pump or at the grocery store? You actually can benefit from it. And so there's ways using real estate or other real assets such as precious metals and other things. So that's a free download at bronsonequity.com. Also some information about our upcoming deals. But it's been great, man. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun being a Wealth Without Wall Street. I love it. Love it.
Well, Tribe, today you've learned a new skill, hopefully, and maybe a possible pathway for you. Bronson, thank you for being willing to share. And if you found value in today's episode, would you do us a favor right now? Stop what you're doing, go and share this episode with somebody else. Go rate and review the podcast. Those things help us to continue to spread this message of freedom to all who will benefit from it. And we're very grateful to have you. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.